You can sleep in the shed. My name is Maybelline Delaney. I'm 74 years old, and for the past 3 weeks, I've been sleeping in my son's shed, next to a rusty lawnmower and a family of rats that don't flinch when I cry. The night it happened, I still remember the smell of lemon disinfectant. I had just come in from the garden, my knees aching, hands full of rosemary and mint I was saving for Sunday roast. That was when I saw her, Celine, my daughter-in-law, standing at the door, arms crossed, her fake lashes fluttering like she was queen of this house. "You can't come in right now," she said. "The girls are having a moment." The girls. I peered over her shoulder. 3 women I didn't recognize were sitting on my floral couch, drinking from my china teacups. My late husband's veteran flag, once neatly folded in a glass case, had been moved to make room for a Bluetooth speaker blasting trap music. "I just need to grab my medication and lie down," I said, trying to step forward. Celine didn't budge. "Well, you can sleep in the shed tonight. It's not that cold." She was dead serious. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her lips were pursed in satisfaction, and there was a fire behind her hazel eyes that didn't exist the day I welcomed her into our family. I remembered hugging her tight the first time my son, Henry, introduced us, telling her I was glad he found someone who could match his dreams. I didn't realize she'd match his dreams by turning mine into nightmares. I slept in the shed that night. The air was damp and thick with oil fumes. My back screamed in protest, but I curled up on a pile of old cushions like some stray cat. I didn't cry. Not yet. That came the next morning, when I realized my suitcase had been placed by the shed door. Not just my nightgown but everything I owned. Bible. Even the last photo I had of my husband, Alfred, tucked into the pocket of my robe. She planned it. And Henry, my only child. He wasn't home that weekend. Celine told me he went on a business retreat with some startup bros in Miami. When I called his phone, it rang once, then went to voicemail. I left a message. I left another. And then I stopped calling altogether. Celine had moved her friends in. Not for a night. Not even for a weekend. They were living there. Eating in my kitchen. Walking barefoot through my house. One of them even had the audacity to ask if I could do laundry since I was already up early. I was invisible. And worse, I was disposable. "You look tired," one of them laughed one morning, as I passed through the kitchen to pour myself water. I would be too if I was sneaking in and out like a raccoon. They laughed like high school girls, all curled up in my living room, binge-watching reality shows and mocking my crocheted pillows. That evening, Celine cornered me by the pantry. "Let's make this easy, okay?" she said, flipping her long curls over her shoulder. "You're old. You can't keep up with this house. Henry's working hard to keep things afloat and frankly you're just in the way. So, you can stay in the shed until we figure something out. Or you can leave." Her tone was sugar-laced venom. I clenched my fists. "I paid off this house," I whispered. Celine smirked. "You helped, sweetie. But your name's not on the mortgage anymore. Remember?" And that's when I knew. She'd been planning this. Bit by bit. Convincing Henry to switch the paperwork. Telling him it was just estate planning. Manipulating her way into the title while I cooked her dinner and folded her laundry. I swallowed hard. Could have screamed. Could have dragged my old bones through the neighborhood and begged someone to help. But instead I stayed in that shed. Day after day. Week after week. I listened. I watched. And I planned. 'Cause you see I had a secret. And while they laughed, while they smoked in my garden and danced in my living room, I remembered the one thing they didn't know. I still had access to the mortgage account. The one linked to the house. The one Celine boasted about as her forever home. And last night, after they went to bed drunk off champagne and self-importance, I used the Wi-Fi from the shed, opened my old laptop and clicked freeze account. Just like that. The screen blinked. And everything changed. I sat back in that cold shed and smiled, for the first time in weeks. 'Cause they thought I was weak. They thought I was done. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The sun rose slow and golden, Just like the one I watched from this same yard 35 years ago, when Alfred and I first built this house from the ground up. Back then we had nothing but a VA loan, calloused hands, and dreams too big for our paycheck. But somehow, through prayer and grit, we made it work. And now here I was in the backyard of that same house, sipping instant coffee with my legs wrapped in 2 fleece blankets, while the current queen of the castle stormed through the back door barefoot and red in the face. "What do you do?" Celine's voice cracked like a whip across the yard. I didn't flinch. I just looked up at her and took another slow sip. "I don't know what you mean," I said, letting my words stretch like warm syrup. She marched up to me like a raging bull in a silk robe. "My mortgage payment bounced," she spat. "Bank flagged it as owner action required. The app says the account is frozen. I'm locked out of everything." "Everything?" I tilted my head. "That must be frustrating." She looked like she wanted to throw the coffee out of my hand. But instead she did something worse. She laughed. "You think this scares me? You old witch. Henry's gonna fix this the second he gets back." Smiled. "Oh, I'm counting on it." She blinked, confused. Because for once, I wasn't rattled. I wasn't scared. I didn't shrink like I usually did whenever her voice rose or her eyes rolled. And that scared her. Later that morning I went back into the house. Not because I was allowed to, but because I dared. I marched into the kitchen and pulled my favorite cast iron skillet out from the cabinet. The same one Alfred bought me on our 20th anniversary. Celine stood frozen in the hallway, phone in her hand, whispering frantically to someone. I could hear her voice tremble. "She's doing something, she's up to something. Just get back here, Henry. Now." And that's when I saw it. The fear. The realization that maybe, just maybe, the woman she thought she'd broken wasn't broken at all. As the smell of frying bacon filled the kitchen, my mind drifted back to when it all started going wrong. It was 4 years ago, after Alfred passed. His death left a hole so big I thought I'd fall into it and never crawl out. Henry and Celine moved in shortly after. Said they didn't want me to be alone. Said it was temporary. They started small. Celine changed the curtains. Then the furniture. Then the locks. She slowly erased Alfred from the home. His medals went into storage. His favorite chair was given to a neighbor for space. His photos were replaced with abstract art I never understood. Then came the manipulation. "You shouldn't be climbing stairs, Ma," Henry would say, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Let us move the bedroom downstairs. Better for your safety." What he didn't tell me was that the master bedroom upstairs would be gutted and turned into Celine's dream spa bathroom. I saw the plans months later, buried beneath a stack of utility bills. But I loved my son. I trusted him. So I stayed quiet. I gave them access to my accounts to simplify bills. I co-signed documents I didn't fully read. I allowed Celine to handle most of the home maintenance, because she's good with apps. And when she started calling the house hers in front of guests, I told myself it was just prideful talk. Nothing more. But it was more. It was theft. Emotional theft. The kind that doesn't show up on paper, but eats away at your dignity inch by inch. I remember one Christmas, Celine gifted me a vacuum cleaner. Not a hug. Not a card. Not even a family photo. Just a cordless vacuum and a smirk. Like cleaning was all I was good for. Even Henry started changing. My son, who used to call every Sunday and leave flowers by the window, stopped making eye contact. Started blaming his stress on me. Started saying things like, "Ma, just let Celine handle it." So I did. Until I was no longer Ma. I was the burden. The afterthought. The woman living in the shed. But no more. That evening, as the sky turned lilac and the frogs began singing in the marsh, I pulled out my old leather notebook, the one where Alfred and I wrote every bill, every home repair, every investment. And I flipped to the page titled, Contingency Plan. If they ever try anything. You see, Alfred wasn't just a war hero. He was smart. Suspicious of smiles that came too quick. And when we paid off the house in 2004, He insisted we set up an emergency backup. A second mortgage account held in my name only. It was an outdated mechanism, one the bank had since archived. But archived doesn't mean erased. I had logged in 3 nights ago using the old password. Alfie March 1952. And there it was. A dormant control function with 3 options. Freeze. Transfer. Revoke. Chose freeze. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Because the next step, the one that would flip this entire house upside down, was already in motion. Tomorrow morning I had a meeting. Not with the bank. Not with a lawyer. But with the original title officer who handled the paperwork 30 years ago. She still lived in town. Still remembered me. And she had documents, buried ones, that Celine never thought to look for. Because the house might not be in my name today. But once I reveal what Alfred really did, 'twill be again. The next morning came with a grey mist and a chill that slipped through my scarf. I dressed in my Sunday best. Navy skirt, ivory blouse, and Alfred's old trench coat. The lining was torn and smelled faintly of pipe tobacco, but I wore it like armor. He needed to. The town hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks. Same peeling paint on the diner windows. The same streetlight that blinked at the intersection like it couldn't make up its mind. But I had changed. And as I walked into that small brick building on Main Street, the county records office, I didn't walk like someone trying to beg for her house back. I walked like someone who still owned it. Behind the glass partition sat a plump woman in cat-eye glasses. Her name tag read Gloria, just as I remembered. She was older now, like me. But when she looked up and saw me, her eyes lit with surprise. "Maybelline Delaney," she gasped. "Well, I'll be. I thought you and Alfred had moved out to Florida." Smiled weakly. "We almost did. But then life kept us here." Gloria ushered me into her office and poured me a cup of lukewarm coffee in a chipped mug with daisies on it. "What brings you in, sugar?" "I need help," I said, placing the worn leather notebook on her desk. "It's about the house." Title: The account Alfred and I opened in '94. He said if anything happened, you'd know what to do. Her brow furrowed as she turned the pages. When she reached the yellowing receipt stapled to page 16, she inhaled sharply. This is a surviving spousal clause," she whispered. "We filed this before the county switched to digital-only records. But it's still valid." I leaned in. "What does that mean?" Gloria looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "It means you have more legal right to that house than whoever's name is on the title now." I blinked. "You mean Celine? If your husband passed and this clause was never voided, then yes," she nodded, pulling open a drawer full of manila folders. "You have legal leverage. And if she made changes without your knowledge, that's not just morally wrong, it could be criminal." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. All those nights in the shed. All those mornings where she tossed me stale toast like I was some forgotten pet. All the time she whispered behind my back that I was losing it, just waiting for the day I'd die so she could redecorate in peace. And here, in a dusty office with weak coffee and stronger truth, I finally had something she didn't. Proof. We printed 3 copies. Gloria notarized the older clause and gave me the contact for a local estate lawyer. Someone who'd handled cases for seniors before and wouldn't be intimidated by flashy lawyers in high heels or fake tears. As I stepped back into the street, the clouds had parted. The sun shone pale but proud. And I knew something had shifted. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about my name, my legacy, my worth. I wasn't just Henry's mother. I wasn't just the old lady who lives in the shed. I was Mrs. Maybelline Delaney. And I was done being erased. Back at the house, I found my garden trampled. Celine's friend, Cassandra or Candace or something starting with a C, was spraying self-tanner on the back porch. I ignored her and walked straight inside. Celine was in the kitchen, pacing. "Where have you been?" she snapped. I set the papers on the table, slow and deliberate. "Fixing what you broke." She snatched the folder, skimmed the first page and paled. "You're bluffing." No, darling, I said softly. You are. That night, she screamed at Henry on the phone. Called me a witch. Accused me of plotting. Begged. Threatened. And Henry, my son who once cried when I burned my hand on the kettle. He said 4 words that broke me all over again. Ma, just go quietly. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the shed again. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to remember it. Every cold inch. Every broken promise. Every rat that watched me pray myself to sleep. Because soon, I wouldn't be the one leaving. They would. Tomorrow morning, when Celine wakes up and her payment bounces, what will she do? And what will Henry say when he finds out his vacation was all part of her plan? I stared at the note in my hands, the candle beside me flickering as if it too sensed danger. She's hiding something. Check the attic. There was no name. No signature. Just those 7 shaky words scrawled on the back of an old grocery receipt. I clutched it tight as I rose from the creaky cot in the shed. My joints protested, my back groaned, but my heart thundered. Who wrote this? Was it one of her so-called friends? One of the neighbors? Or could it be Henry? I waited until the house fell silent. Around 2:17 a.m., the lights in the kitchen dimmed. The laughter from the living room, Celine's favorite crime drama, and the clink of wine glasses finally died down. I crept across the dew-covered grass and slipped through the back door like a ghost. The stairs to the attic were behind a panel in the upstairs hallway. A place Celine never bothered to touch because she hated old things. But Alfred and I had always kept it locked. And I had the key. A tiny bronze thing sewn into the hem of my winter shawl because Alfred said, "Some things are safer when hidden where love lives." My hands trembled as I slid the key into the panel and pulled down the narrow ladder. Dust exploded around me as I ascended, each step creaking with secrets. The attic was darker than I remembered. And colder. But everything was where we left it. Christmas wreaths, Alfred's navy footlocker, my wedding dress in a moth-eaten box. And then I saw the suitcase. A red one. Newer. Tucked beneath a tarp. I crouched and pulled it out. Inside were things that didn't belong to me. Designer shoes. Wads of cash in envelopes marked Client A. Client B. Fake IDs. A folder with documents I didn't understand. Loan applications, property deeds under different names, offshore bank account codes. My throat went dry. Celine was running something. Something illegal. Maybe even dangerous. And she was doing it all from my home. Suddenly, a floorboard groaned below. Froze. Voices. 2 of them. "Did you give her the note?" Someone whispered. She needed to know. Footsteps neared. My heart pounded so loudly I feared they'd hear it through the ceiling. I don't care what she finds. We just need that final transfer to go through before Henry gets back. That was Celine. And the other voice. Familiar. It's too risky. If she talks, she won't. He's weak. She couldn't even fight for her own room. Weak. The word dug into my spine like a knife. I held my breath as their voices faded. Then I climbed down, silent as dust. By morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the suitcase beside me. When Celine walked in, still in silk pajamas and fake kindness, I gestured to the chair. "Sit." She blinked. "What is this? Some breakfast lecture?" I said nothing. I unzipped the suitcase. Her face drained like a sink with a snapped pipe. "Where did you? You didn't just steal a house, Celine," I said, keeping my voice even. "You ran a con. In my home. With my trust. You can't prove anything," she whispered, looking toward the hallway like someone might rescue her. "I don't have to. Because in 2 hours I'll be sitting with an attorney. And this suitcase will be there too." She stood up fast, knocking over the chair. "You're bluffing." I leaned forward. "Try me." The rest of the morning passed in a blur. She called Henry 7 times. He didn't answer. Her friends packed their bags like roaches in daylight. And when I showed up at the lawyer's office with Gloria's notarized clause, my ID, and the red suitcase, the look on his face said it all. This This is more than enough. He explained it carefully. With the clause and title errors, I could trigger a civil suit and freeze all assets tied to the property. Celine would be investigated for fraud, and depending on the depth of what I found in that suitcase, she could face criminal charges. I don't want revenge, I told him. I want my peace, my name back, my dignity. He smiled. Then let's take it. That night, I returned home to silence. The front porch light was on, dim and flickering. The house smelled like lavender and bleach. Celine was in the living room, her bags by the door. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I just walked past her, slow and sure, and climbed the stairs to my old bedroom. It was bare. She'd taken the curtains, the rug, even my reading lamp. But it was mine again. And that was enough for now. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. And I called Henry. He answered this time. Ma. My voice was calm. Steady. I'm going to tell you everything, Henry. You're not going to like it. But you need to hear it. He was silent. And then, I'm coming home. But when Henry walked through the door 2 days later, he wasn't alone. And the woman standing beside him made my blood run cold. I stood there in the entryway, frozen like the morning dew clinging to the porch rail. Henry had just stepped in, bags in hand. His eyes darted to the floor, the walls, anywhere but my face. And beside him was her. A woman no older than 30. Light brown skin. Cropped curls. Elegant heels clicking on my tiles like they belonged there. She smiled like she was walking into a brunch, not the scene of a betrayal. Hi. You must be Mabel. I've heard so much about you. I didn't blink. Didn't speak. I looked at Henry instead. He finally lifted his eyes. Ma, I need to explain. I walked straight to the sofa and sat down slowly, gripping the armrest to steady my trembling body. The woman walked past me, brazen and casual, and set her purse on the coffee table. The same table where Alfred used to lay out the Sunday paper and fold his glasses neatly when he'd bring me coffee in bed. I looked back at Henry. Explain. He rubbed the back of his neck. A nervous habit from childhood. This is Janelle. She and I, we've been close. Close. I repeated. He cleared his throat. I filed for divorce from Celine 6 months ago. She just never signed the papers. We've been separated for almost a year. I didn't want to tell you until it was final. My jaw clenched. I could feel the throb in my temples. She was living in this house. Stealing from me. Sleeping while I froze in the shed. And you were on vacation with her. She didn't tell me you were here, he said quickly. She said you moved to Florida. Said you didn't want to be bothered anymore. I stared at him in disbelief. I left messages, Henry. Dozens. I never got any. Because she erased me. Snap. From my home. From your life. And you let her. Silence fell thick. Janelle stepped forward. Mabel, she said gently. I know this is a shock, but I'm not here to hurt you. I actually came to help. I told Henry to come home and face this. We both know Celine's dangerous. I studied her. Her voice was calm, her tone respectful. But I wasn't ready to trust the shine on her shoes or the sympathy in her voice. She stole everything I built with Alfred, I whispered. And now you walk in holding my son's hand like a fresh start. Janelle lowered her gaze. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to see the truth. She reached into her purse and pulled out a USB stick. This is everything. Proof of what Celine was doing. Henry didn't want to believe it at first, but I dug deeper. I took the drive but didn't look at it. You think justice is on a stick? I asked quietly. No, she said. But it's a start. That night, after they both went to bed, Janelle in the guest room, Henry in the den, I opened Alfred's old laptop and plugged in the drive. What I saw made me sick. Bank transfers. Forged applications. Celine had been running a housing scam, selling phony shares of the house to desperate investors, promising returns she'd never deliver. And worse, she used my signature on some of the paperwork. Name. My identity. She didn't just take the house. It took me. I stared at the blinking screen until tears rolled down and soaked the collar of my nightdress. Then I printed everything. And the next morning, I placed the stack neatly on the table where Celine once laughed with her wine-drunk friends. Then I called the lawyer. File everything, I said. He paused. Everything. Yes. Civil and criminal. I looked around the house that bore my history, my scars, my joy. And now my fire. I want her gone. Forever. The news came 3 days later. Celine had fled. Bank accounts frozen. Her so-called friends flipped on her. She'd been living on lies and borrowed time, and I had lit the match. But it wasn't over. Because while I stood in the hallway rereading the sheriff's report, Henry walked in with something else in his hand. A will. Alfred's will. The original one. I blinked in confusion. Where did you find that? In the attic, he said softly. Behind the footlocker. Folded in one of your old hymn books. Opened it. And my world stopped. Because the house wasn't the only thing left to me. Alfred had named me the sole beneficiary of a private retirement account, one I never knew existed. Over $270,000. Untouched. Hidden in a trust. Why didn't I know? I whispered. Because, Henry said, voice thick. He didn't trust me. Or Celine. He wrote this just before he died. Said he'd mail it to the lawyer, but I think he hid it instead. I held the paper to my chest like it was my husband's heartbeat. But just as relief started to creep in, the doorbell rang. And on the other side was a man in a black suit, holding a large envelope. He handed it to me with a grim nod. Ma'am, he said, you've been named in an active federal investigation. We'll need to ask some questions. As I opened the envelope with shaking hands, one photo slipped out. My face on a document I never signed, in a state I've never been to. The photo in my lap didn't make sense. It was my face, but the background wasn't anywhere I recognized. A clean-cut photo, like a passport headshot, stapled to paperwork labeled, Nevada Rental LLC. Ownership transfer authorization. I'd never been to Nevada in my life. My stomach twisted as I flipped through the other documents in the envelope. Fraudulent business licenses. Bank account openings. Utility bills. All under my name. And not just one. 5 different states. The man in the black suit, Agent Collins, stood patiently across from me in the living room. He didn't look unkind, but he didn't look like he was here to hand out apologies either. Ma'am, have you ever signed any documents relating to property management companies in Arizona, Nevada, or North Carolina? No, I said, barely above a whisper. I've never even been west of Missouri. He nodded slowly, already expecting that answer. We believe you're a victim of identity theft. Based on the accounts opened and the timeline, it appears your daughter-in-law, Ms. Celine Brewster, was part of a larger ring. She used your identity to legitimize shell businesses. It wasn't just your home she was targeting. Henry walked in just then, his face pale. What's going on? I handed him the envelope, and as he flipped through the pages, I watched the denial in his eyes slowly dissolve. I didn't know it was this deep. Agent Collins continued. We're working with federal prosecutors. You're not in legal danger, ma'am. But we will need your full cooperation. Statements, identification of signatures, maybe a court appearance. He nodded. You'll have it. He gave a tight smile. You'll also want to contact the bank and credit bureaus. Your accounts need freezing. All of them. The moment he left, the air in the house felt thinner. Heaviness pressed against my ribs like I'd been walking with a weight for years, and only now realized how deep the bruises ran. I sat on the floor of the den where Alfred used to nap and whispered. She didn't just want to ruin me, she wanted to replace me. Henry knelt beside me. Ma, don't. He closed his mouth. I raised you better than this, I said quietly. I taught you to see people, to protect what matters. And you left me for a woman who forged my name and fed me scraps. He swallowed. I made a mistake. I looked at him hard. You made many. Janelle entered the room, holding tea. She offered me a cup. I didn't take it. I need space, I said. She nodded and left without another word. The next few days were chaos. I met with the bank, closed every vulnerable account, filed fraud reports, met with a federal claims lawyer who confirmed I had a strong civil case against Celine, one that could eventually reclaim every dime. But none of that brought me peace. Because money can be returned. Dignity doesn't come with a receipt. It was during one of those long nights that I returned to the attic. Not for boxes or clues. But for Alfred. I needed to hear his voice again. So I pulled out the dusty tape recorder from his old Navy chest. He'd used it to document his thoughts, little affirmations. And there, among the static and creaks, I found his final recording. His voice, worn but strong, filled the attic. If you're listening to this, Mabel, something happened. And if it did, I know it means you stayed. You fought. You always do. I covered my mouth as tears rolled down my cheeks. Don't let anyone take your light. This home is yours. Always was. If someone's tried to steal that from you, don't fight for bricks, baby. Fight for your name. Your name has power. I curled up in a pile of old quilts, sobbing quietly. Because that was what I'd almost lost. Not just the house or my comfort. For me. The next morning I came down to breakfast with my head high. Henry and Janelle were seated awkwardly, sipping coffee. I poured myself a cup and sat across from them. I want you out, I said simply. Henry blinked. What? Not forever. Just until I can breathe again. You brought her into this house. You let Celine control my life. And now I need to remember who I am without cleaning up after the both of you. But Ma, I said what I said. They left later that day. No shouting. No begging. Just silence. And that silence. It was peace. 3 weeks passed. I started gardening again. Bought new curtains. Reclaimed my bedroom. I even joined a senior book club and took up piano again. My fingers were slower, but every note felt like healing. And then one morning I checked my mail. Thick brown envelope. No return address. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. The first line made my hands go cold. I know what Celine did. But I was there too. I was part of it. And I can't live with the secret anymore. Attached was a name. And an address. One of Celine's friends. Quiet one. The one who always looked away. And she was ready to talk. I picked up my coat and keys. If she really was ready to confess. This wasn't just justice. This was the final piece. The air was thick with tension as I drove across town, the letter folded neatly in my coat pocket, like a map drawn in gilt. The address led me to a narrow townhouse on the edge of a rundown development. Shutters hanging crooked, grass overgrown, a single wind chime tapping like a heartbeat in the breeze. I knocked once, then twice. The door creaked open an inch. Mabel! A voice whispered from behind the chain. Yes. The chain slid back and the door opened fully. It was her Raya, the soft-spoken one. She had always been in the background during Celine's reign, never laughing as loudly, never drinking as much, never making eye contact with me. Now she looked thinner, ill, nervous. She gestured for me to come inside. I wasn't going to say anything, she murmured, leading me into a dimly lit living room that smelled of coffee and cold fear. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the way you looked. The night she made you sleep in the shed. I didn't sit. I stood, hands folded in front of me, steady as stone. I need the truth, Raya. She nodded quickly, hands shaking. I'll tell you everything. And she did. Celine had been planning the takeover for over 2 years. It started with convincing Henry to add her to the mortgage. Then she persuaded him to switch everything into a trust for tax reasons. A trust she controlled. Raya had helped forge documents. Nothing major at first. A signature here. A witness there. Celine promised her money. Business. Said she was just getting what she was owed after being overlooked her whole life. She said you were fading, Raya whispered. That you were forgetful. That she was doing you a favor by taking over the house. Closed my eyes. She told Henry you were moving to assisted living. Even made him tour one. That's why he stopped asking questions. Raya bit her lip. But then you didn't leave. You stayed. And Celine got cruel. She said you were stubborn. Said the only way to push you out was to break you down. My knees nearly buckled. She had a plan. If you cracked, mentally, emotionally, she could file for full conservatorship. Take everything legally. She even had the paperwork drawn up. And you? Yes. You just watched. Raya nodded, eyes glassy. I thought it would end sooner. I didn't think you'd actually stay in the shed. I didn't think. She trailed off, then handed me a USB stick and a sealed folder. What's this? Recordings. Messages. Copies of the fake forms. Everything I have. I stared at it. Why now? She swallowed hard. Because she's not just dangerous to you. She's dangerous to anyone who trusts her. And she hasn't stopped. My head jerked up. What do you mean? She's in Georgia. Starting over. She's using your name again. My heart went still. She's selling a new house under your identity. Saying she's the widow of a military hero. She even wears dog tags she bought online. She says the last situation didn't scare her, just made her smarter. Rage boiled beneath my skin. But it wasn't the kind that screams. It was the kind that acts. I took the folder. And for the first time in months I felt whole. Because the final piece had fallen into place. And it wasn't about my name anymore. It was about every woman like me. Forgotten, ignored, pushed aside. Thanked Raya. Told her to get out of town. Told her I'd do what she didn't have the strength to finish. That night I met with my lawyer again. We went through every file. Every message. Every document. And then I made a decision. I wasn't going to just take my house back. I was going to press charges. In 2 states. I was going to expose her schemes. Publicly. And with the evidence from Raya. Could do it. I launched the case 2 weeks later. Federal filing. News stations picked it up after the DA confirmed multiple victims had been identified. And they wanted me to speak. First I hesitated. But then I remembered Alfred's voice. Your name has power. So I stood on the courthouse steps, shoulders square, pressed microphones in my face and said, my name is Maybelline Delaney. I am a widow, a mother, and the rightful owner of everything Celine tried to erase. She used my name to lie, steal, and strip me of my dignity. But she forgot something. Names don't build houses. Women like me do. The courtroom gave me a standing ovation. But it wasn't pride I felt. It was peace. That evening, Henry returned. He didn't knock. He stood on the porch with flowers and a quivering voice. Ma, he said, I watched your speech. I've never been so ashamed. And never been so proud. I didn't reach for the flowers. Do you understand now? Yes. He nodded, tears streaming. I let her do it. I let her convince me you were fading. But you were never fading, you were fighting. We stood there in the dusk. No hugs, just truth. And it was enough. Until the phone rang. Picked up. It was my lawyer. Mrs. Delaney, he said cautiously. We just found another deed transfer attempt in your name. Dated last week. Out of state. I gripped the counter. She's still running. Yes, he said. And this time she's not alone. He emailed the documents immediately. And when I opened them, the second signature beneath Celine's name made my knees buckle. It was Henry's. Broken heart if this story moved you. If you've ever felt erased, overlooked, or betrayed by the ones you love the most, then this is your reminder. Your voice matters, your story matters, and you're never too old to fight back. Folded hands don't let Mabel's strength go unnoticed. Like if her courage inspired you. Comment if you've ever had to reclaim your dignity. And subscribe for more stories where the underestimated rise. And justice always finds its way home. Because in this community, no name gets forgotten. And no woman stands alone.